Hi, my name is Juliet Burch, and I am a short film programmer for Film Fest DC. And today I am in conversation with Asher Huey, writer and producer of American Dream, and Angela Garcia Combs, director of American Dream, and Ivan Kander, the writer and director of Minion Duty. And these films are both featured in our Metro Shorts program, which focuses on talent in the DC area. So by way of a brief intro, Asher is a DC-based progressive activist and organizer. He's worked with various organizations and coalitions to create substantive change, particularly in the areas of LGBT rights, education, labor, environment, and social justice. Ivan is a filmmaker, writer, video editor, and motion graphics artist from Washington, D.C. He is also an assistant editor at the short film curation site, Short of the Week. Angela Garcia Combs is an award-winning writer and director who focuses on female perspective while maintaining a light touch, a sharp wit, and an accessible style. Included in her filmography is her feature Nothing Special, featuring Karen Black in her last starring role. She is also the proud mom of Asher Huey and Julia Garcia Combs, who is the lead in American Dream. And so that's going to be interesting to talk about, I think. Let's start with you, Asher, and Angela, please chime in. Can you tell us, Asher, was this your first script? And just tell us a little about the origin of the story.
Yeah, the first thing that I've made and completed, I studied theater in college, so I've written plenty of plays and other things, and I, grew up with a writer director as a mother, and so when I was a kid, I would write scripts by hand in notebooks. But this was the first time that I actually produced it and finished it. So, and in terms of the story and how we came up with it, I actually wrote the first draft many years ago. And part of it is, my work. I am currently the digital director at the American Federation of Teachers. I've spent a long time working in the labor movement. And so the themes about work, about how we treat workers, are something, particularly with the gigification of work, with the rise of a gig economy that doesn't always meet the needs of workers, sort of examining that, something I've been very interested in for a long time. There are several other elements from work that I've done that sort of make an appearance in the film, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later. Angela?
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say Asher had been writing scripts for a long time, and he first sent the script to somebody else to make, and I read it and I was jealous. Remember that? I was like, wait a minute, this is pretty amazing, because it's really hard to make a short movie, write a short script. They're really difficult to do well. There's a lot of them that are very quick and gimmicky and that kind of thing, and I've never been interested in doing that kind of thing. But this was a short that had a complete story. It was very complex, and I was jealous, but I understood. And then he said to me, Mom, you don't make shorts. You're not going to make another short, so don't be jealous. So I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to make a short. And then, of course, the pandemic happened, and I was going a little mad, and so we decided to make a short.
And that worked for you. Yeah. In pandemic times. And Ivan, can you tell us about the origin of your story and writing the script?
Yeah, actually, I wrote the script pre-pandemic. I had planned to shoot it in 2020, which didn't happen. But looking back at all the films I've made in the past, I think I realized how unspecific they were and how not from my life experience they were. So with this script, my goal was to create something that was deeply personal and meant something. And I think the end product is better because of it. And I think it seems very obvious, obviously, that you should write what you know. I mean, that's the oldest writing tip in the book. But I think we get away from that it's easy to get away from that. So with this film, I really wanted to concentrate on something that felt very uniquely specific to me. I just didn't want to tell it exactly from my voice, which is why I centered the two characters to be two sisters. But everything else is definitely stuff that I've dealt with, or my life experience and all that kind of stuff.
That is very interesting, because you're both writing about women. And yeah, so Asher, do you want to comment on that? And then overall, Angela, you were talking about the short story, and how this is a difficult format to do very, very well. And as a short film programmer, which is exclusively what I do now, and I've done both, I place a value on a well-crafted short story. So I'd really love to hear about what you all think about working in the short story format. So those are a lot of questions.
Yeah. The question that you posed to me was specifically about writing women and writing women's characters, and the fact that both of our films did that. And I actually thought about that when I was watching Minion Duty. Well, I wrote it specifically with an actor in mind. I wrote it specifically for my sister, who herself did gig work for a long time. And some of what's in there are stories that she told me about how people would treat her, because it's really an examination of how we treat people. So in terms of writing for women, I had a specific person in mind, somebody who I knew could do this role, do justice to the role. I think that, as you're asking this, I think about a movie with from As Good as It Gets, where Jack Nicholson's character has this incredibly sexist line that I thought was so funny back in the day, and I can't believe that I laughed at it. But he says, when writing women, I think of a man, but I take away accountability and reason. And I think it's actually exactly the opposite, right? You want to have a true full character, and you don't want to create some sort of, this is my idea of what a woman is. You want to create a character who's actually going through something deep and having to process it in each moment. And I actually think Ivan did this with, he's down here for me. I don't know where he is for everyone else. But I think he also did that particularly well, with two complex, full characters who go on a journey and have an honest reaction to what's happening around them. And that's what I wanted to achieve with it. And I wanted to tell a story specifically about people in this situation. And in this case, I wrote it for a woman.
I just want to say on that, first of all, Ivan's actors were really lovely, and they brought all that complexity, and it was well edited. So, you never lingered on something. Nothing ever went false there. So it was really nice. As far as Asher goes, he's been an inclusionary feminist his whole life. He was raised by me, but he really is. He's dedicated to that, and strong value around a lot of women. And I think your era of man has the opportunity to be an inclusionary feminist, whereas the men of my era may not have been raised that way. But there's just a lot more young men that are able to fully realize female characters in ways that older men just haven't, because they haven't bothered, and they're not influenced, and their world was different.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Angela, do you want to talk some about more about the short story format and the unique experience of working in the short story versus the longer?
Well, the thing is every story needs a beginning, middle, and end. And even if you leave your end open, it still has to have some kind of closure and imagination for the future or what have you. And doing that, our short is 20 minutes, which is kind of long in the world of short stories. but I wanted for all those complexities to come out, because, you know, it could be another story. The gig economy is current. So I thought, let's show how complex the situation is, and we need this many pages. And I even cut a few scenes to Asher's chagrin, which would have made it even more complex, you know, but I had to decide how to shape it all towards that final moment, which is a very big payoff.
Yeah,
And, you
really
know,
moving.
yeah, just make the humanity clear that it could be anybody. It's not workplace abuse is not relegated to a single group. All groups are a part of it. So the short story format is hard to do that in, and it's nice to have nearly 2 hours to have a beginning, middle, and end, and to have all these complex things happen. And also in the filming, you get to have more breath, more room to breathe. And the only place I felt like I could and should take breath in American Dream was her walking up those hills, and not just because she had to take the bus everywhere, but also because the environment, which is why I use the wide lenses, is so much a part of her just looking around and seeing beauty and houses she'll never live in, and, you know, the golden sunlight and all those things. It's the only place I could find room to take a breath. And you still need a breath in short films. You need to, like, be able to digest all the complexities that are happening to you. So that's really challenging to do.
And that's so well said. You still need a breath. And Ivan, could you comment on the short story format for you? I think that's, you know, pretty much primarily what you've done. And how do you perceive that? And especially this this concept of breath and the kind of precision of the energy that occurs in a short story.
I think Angela said it really well. I watch a lot of short films, a lot, because I curate for a website that features them. And I think she put it earlier that there's like, I think there's like 3 kinds of short films. There's the joke short film, which is like a 3-minute, like it's all dependent on a goofy joke payoff or some kind of reversal that you can get done in 5 minutes. There's like the teaser short film, which is popular for people that are trying to, you know, show proof of concept, but those are ultimately very unsatisfying because it's usually like 15 minutes of setup and then absolutely no payoff. And then there's like the ones that attempt to tell like that full story, like Angela was saying, which is really hard in the short medium because you don't have the luxury, obviously, of having like like actual acts like you would in a feature. And you don't want to be too concrete in your conclusion in that like there you can kind of exist in this realm of ambiguity a little bit, but so you have to kind of find that balance. And I think that's really, really hard to do in like that 15 to 20 minute space. But those are the only short films that I really respond to, are the ones that manage to pull that off. So that's what I've been trying to do and attempting to do for better or worse for the past, 15 years or so. So I don't even embark on making a short film unless I know that there is a conclusion to it that, I've been successful or not successful before in the past, but I've always attempted to tell a full story within that time period, because my goal is that you should walk away like, it might not be a full meal that you've received, but you should be satisfied by the meal that was given to you. It's not like they're just giving you like that little amuse-bouche that you like gobble down. And so I didn't want that experience in making the film. And in terms of like pacing, I think that's really hard with short films, because I think in the back of everyone's head, especially because if you're trying to go the festival route, you're like, oh, they're not going to program it if it's over, 10 minutes. They're not going to program it if it's over 13 minutes or whatnot. I do think that's often very arbitrary though, because a good short movie will earn and warrant its 20-minute runtime, like Angela said. And I think people will be along for that ride. So while I would never suggest or offer the advice that any aspiring filmmaker should aim to make a 30-minute short film, I think that they'll know in the creation of it what is allowed to stay and what is allowed to let those moments breathe. And I think as a filmmaker, something I'm still learning, especially in working with actors, is figuring out how to let them be comfortable in that silence. And that's something I'm still struggling with as a director. And I think it's something that we intrinsically just watch in really good filmmaking and acting, where there's so much done in the times where nothing is being said. And I'm trying to get that balance right in my own films, where it's like, how long can I let this hang? How can I steal a moment in the edit? Maybe I didn't get it on set, and maybe I can find a way to give that space in the edit somehow. And it's something that I'm going to continue to work on, especially because all my scripts are too chatty and they're too talky. So it's a matter of like trying to work against my innate instinct to have everyone talk all the time.
Well, I would say that you really reached a beautiful balance in this film, because the quick, rapid fire, witty dialogue is juxtaposed with this huge moment of silence. The pinnacle of the film, when Ariel says to Ray, "You don't need to stand if you're not in mourning." And then the other sister has this epiphany that he is in mourning, and that all of that takes, he says, "I know." And really the most important thing in the film happens in a silent moment. Would you like to talk about that? And I actually have a similar moment in your film, Asher and Angela, that I'd love to talk to you about.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I really appreciate you saying that, because it means a lot to me that actually came across. I think that in editing the film, I've editing
the film probably 10 times, and I cried at that moment every single time. So
that's wonderful. That really is special to hear that. Not that I made you sad, but the fact that the film worked for you. But like I think that it's often really tricky to get those moments right, especially when you're editing your own work, because you're very attached to it. You've seen it a million times. You don't know if moments are landing. But yeah, that was my goal with that moment. In fact, I think that whenever you make a film, all you can think about is how you would do things differently. And that's like a sequence that I would potentially have shot. I would have shot it in slow-mo or overcranked, so I would have even more time to let that silence sink in. But yeah, the focus was definitely to, my tendency is to overwrite and to have people talk too much. So it was really nice to have a moment that I crafted that was all about shutting up. So, and I'm glad it was effective.
Yeah, and it was really the relief from the talking, which is fun, that produced that. So the moment, it's actually more of a theme than a moment in your film, in American Dream, was the theme of the 5-year-old. I thought was very interesting. And you have this part in the beginning that's sort of darkly comic. Alfred Molina is talking about this traumatic event when he was 5, and he says, he describes himself as a sweet little 5-year-old trying to be so good. And then your cry moment for me was when the 5-year-old appears at the end, and you see, she's not just, I'm like getting choked up thinking about it now. She's not just working towards her, working towards her own betterment is a much broader, she has a much broader vision of that than we expected. And can you talk about this theme of the 5-year-olds and maybe inner child?
The most influential book and person on my writing, directing, creative life is Alice Miller. And she's a German psychologist, and she wrote this couple of books, one called Thou Shalt Not Be Aware, Society's Betrayal of the Child, and the other one's called For Your Own Good, Hidden Cruelty in Child Rearing. And I recommend it to everybody who's a writer. Everybody should read these 2 books. They're quite dark. And what she does in these books is she examines childhoods and takes complete exception to Freud and talks about how our adulthood is the absurd language that was suppressed in childhood, and lots of other things, replication, stuff like that. And I talked to Asher about this 5-year-old and saying, we need to have Fred's part have a 5-year-old, and something happens to him when he's 5 years old. So I just felt like the theme of her addiction she's very aware that she doesn't want to replicate whatever she has, and she's trying to be the thing for her 5-year-old child, and she recognizes at the opening of the film so that she can carry through all the way to the end. And we understand that that gives her strength, and that those meetings give her strength, and that she's not alone.
Yeah, it's perfectly bracketed. Yeah. And Asher, what is your take on that?
So, well, first, like, just intellectualizing the ending, like, one of the things that I hope people take away from this is we're watching this woman, we know she's struggling with addiction, we're wondering why she wants this money, and there's a very legitimate reason why she's working so hard to get there. And I'm hoping that people, and this doesn't answer your specific question, but I'm hoping that people, when they leave it, they think, was I judging her?
Mm-hmm.
And how come she has to work so hard just to be able to buy a gift for her 5-year-old? Like, she shouldn't have to go through all that just to afford to make him smile. And so, I mean, that was one of the key things that I wanted to tell from the beginning. Like, that was like my thought. I was like, we reveal at the end, this is what she's been doing this whole time. And so I'm glad that paid off. In terms of the inner 5-year-old, I mean, I do think that brackets it really well. I mean,
she's working so hard.
Yeah,
it's so clear she's working so hard. And then she has this scene with her brother where she's just so over his not being able to trust her.
Right. But she also recognizes that part of this is like, she's done things in her past and she's not running away from them, right? This is like one of the themes of sobriety in the film, where she's not trying to take shortcuts. She's doing the work. She's doing the work all along. And it's still so hard, but nobody believes in her. And I mean, this is one of like concepts, like one of the things that we've worked on over the years are like ban the box campaigns, like, should past crimes prevent you from ever succeeding in the future? And so that was one of the things. So in terms of like she hears at the beginning the story about this 5-year-old, and that in some ways sort of inspires her and reminds her of what she is working for. I mean, she specifically references the 5-year-old in response. I mean, I think that it just came together pretty well that
and
moment.
For the actress, because I spoke to the actress, Julia, about it a lot. We did, there was a lot of questions and notes and all that kind of stuff for her preparation. And she, in her backstory, said, I think there was a fire, and that's how she really lost her full any kind of visitation, because she was high. And she came up with all this stuff, and that 5-year-old in peril kind of theme for herself. And I love working with actors and their backstories, because it's not on the screen in words or in an event, but it's definitely on the screen inside of them, and you can tell.
Yeah. And Ivan, your characters clearly have a big backstory together. They're these sisters who, you see that relationship. Like, actually, I have many siblings. We've all got some kind of version of that relationship. I wonder if I can tie this to my favorite line in your film is not the one. My favorite comedic line is about let me see if I can get Sharon in the back office. And I really loved that, Sharon in the back office. And I wonder if we could weave this into a conversation about transgression in your film. So, you're trying to get Sharon in the back office because she will make the minion. Ultimately, a minion is made with a non-Jew. At the end, you've got the observant sister eating a chicken parm. And there's this relationship between the sisters in which, one feels like she's the one who's always taking responsibility and doing things right. The other one is having this freedom. Could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, sure. It seems kind of basic, but I just think it's an interesting character dynamic when you can see where both characters are coming from different places, and then you have to watch them confront that difference between one another. And then I think the conclusion is, from a writing standpoint, it's them finding that place in the middle where they find common ground. And I think that the idea behind the backstory here is a little bit of both sides of myself, where I sometimes I'm like the more rebellious sister, and I'm sometimes like the more observant sister, and especially with my faith and whatnot. I mean,
That's
after
really interesting.
after
Yeah.
my bar mitzvah, I don't think I went to synagogue very regularly, and then it's weird, but you like have phases in your life. And I had a couple kids, and my wife was more observant than me, and then all of a sudden I find myself joining a synagogue again, and it's so I kind of saw both sides of that dynamic, and the concept of the film came about in that we joined a conservative synagogue when my son started going to preschool there. And as a member of the synagogue, they had minyan duty, which is something that I never grew up with. I mean, I went to a Reform synagogue. I never even heard of such a thing. And they're like, no, we have to like staff this every night. They literally do it every night. And I thought that was just a really interesting concept. And at first I was annoyed by it. I was like, I'm busy on Monday nights. I don't want to go there and do that. But when I did it a few times, I realized how beautiful it was. And not even from a faith perspective, but just this idea of community and support that these people are providing one another. And it doesn't, so I came away from that. I was like, I don't even care if any of those people were Jewish or not. I think there's something really beautiful about the religion providing this template, forcing people to be together when they need to be together. Because when you're going through something really sad, or there's it's like you don't know what to do, but sometimes being around other people feels a lot better. It doesn't make you feel as alone. And that's kind of something I wanted to capture in terms of that, where I think that the act of a minyan is a really beautiful thing, regardless of your faith, or, whether you're an atheist or whatnot. I think that just the idea of like, you're going to be together and support people that need support is really lovely. And I thought, how can I create a story that's centered around that manages to hit that while being comedic, while hitting some dramatic notes, and hopefully having a couple interesting characters in there as well.
That's beautifully put. And, it is exactly what you expressed, that this non-Jew who, as it turns out, is in mourning, that's the right place for him to be. This is a true community at this moment. And that's the power of the film. I hate that we've been in conversation a while and need to wrap it up. There's so much more to say about these films. We just kind of started the conversation. So I'm wondering if Asher and Ivan, you could quickly comment on the DC art scene and what it means for you to be part of these communities.
Yeah, I'll go first. I wish we could have found out how hard it was to work with your mom on a movie, because I think that seems really, I don't know if I could have done that. But it seems like you have a really good working relationship, that you didn't butt heads too much. But in terms of the DC art scene, I work in video production in the city. I've worked, I went to school here in DC. I'm from Loudoun County, Virginia. So I've been in this area my whole life. And I have found that when it comes to film, like a lot of the video production stuff I work on tends to be for nonprofit, government, or contractor work. So it tends to be a lot of boring video. People ask what I do for a living. I say I make boring video. That's what I do. But so I need these little short films that I make as an outlet to not make boring video. And I find that a lot of the team, I have a really dedicated team of people I've been working with for years. And I found that we all kind of come together for like 1 week a year and try to make something together, because we are all tired of making like another bland nonprofit, talking head video. So that's kind of where I find myself here. And in that respect, I think that the DC community is a lot smaller, obviously, than the film community of New York and Los Angeles, but I also think it's a lot more close knit. And I don't think there's the amount of ego involved. And I think there is no expectation when you're making this, other than to be a part of a little film family for a little while and hopefully make something cool in the process. And I think that in and of itself is really special, because it's not like anyone's doing this film because they think it's going to be the break in their career or, or whatnot. They just want to make something cool with people they like hanging out with. And as you probably know, Asher, I mean, like, when you're on a film set, it's like this really intimate experience where like they become like your best friends and like your family, like more about these people than anything. And then you don't see each other for 6 months because you're done working on your little movie. So I find that kind of camaraderie really special. And I think that's why I keep on coming back to make these films.
And Asher, what's your thought about the DC arts and film scene?
Well, so I mean, as I said at the beginning, my day job and I've been in DC for 17 years now. Most of that has been, not all of it, but most of it has been working in political spaces. So there've been a lot of those types of videos that Evan was talking about. But one of the things that I love about DC is that while most people sort of have this idea about DC being all suits and politics, while there's plenty of that downtown, DC is also a city with vibrant culture. There is a food scene, there is a theater scene, there is a music scene, there's a film scene, and it just takes getting involved because all of the people here are people who want outlets like that. And so I'm excited to become more involved. I was glad to be a part of this festival. And I'd say for people who don't realize that these things exist, it just takes you wanting to find them and looking for them.
Well, we really appreciate your all being part of the Washington film scene this year. And thank you, Asher. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Ivan, for making the time to talk with us. And to the Film Fest DC audience, we hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Thanks and goodbye.